Photosensitivity warning, viewer discretion is advised. SVC Chaos is a broken game, there's no denying that. Calling it broken is also an understatement, as I cannot even begin to describe the countless issues the game has both on a fundamental and a competitive level. SVC Chaos also, however, is a fun game. Subjective, but that's what I think. In fact, it's not only one of my favorite fighting games, but one of my favorite games, period. Potentially even a top 5 contender. In its weird, alien style and darker tone you usually never see many of these characters in, and the absurd plot of everyone fighting to the death for entry into the afterlife mixed with the janky fighting game gameplay makes for an experience that I can't help but be enamored by. The fact it was a rushed contractual obligation explains many of its problems, but it's a contractual obligation I always come back to despite its problems. There is such a thing as fun bad, so if people can enjoy, say, The Room as so bad it's good, then I don't see how SVC Chaos is any different. Well, ignoring that I don't think SVC is really bad to begin with, and have been fixing the game's wiki. Plus, just because a game may be bad in multiple aspects does not mean it cannot be fun or doesn't have depth to it, and boy does SVC have depth to it. But let's slow down. Broken fighting games are fun, but much like how so bad it's good is a measurement of quality, unfortunately there is also a matter of being too broken. Perhaps it's a matter of borderline ungovernable tournament rules. Now, as for why I made this video, it came to my attention one day somewhat recently that JM Crofts had held a tournament for SVC Chaos with his Twitch subscribers. Well, also the fact that it got re-released on modern consoles announced at EVO, almost as if SNK's Orochi senses started tingling the moment they sensed one man who is way too infatuated with this game in the gaijin wasteland known as America and decided to re-release it, but I digress. Among several thoughts in my head when watching that tournament, well after it had already ended, 2 of them were big sticking points. First, I should at some point make a hypothetical tier list for low skill level play. Second, is that another person commented the same thing. It's all bosses or no bosses. So why do people insist that the tournament rules are all or nothing? I cannot speak for competitive play back in the day as I didn't grow up then, other than Fightcade 1 only had SVC Chaos Plus to play on, so no Final 4 bosses. But these days, SVC tournament rules are a heated debate. No one can agree as to what the rules should be, at least on Fightcade that is, but it gets debated even outside of that. It should also be kept in mind that SVC is not only broken, but is surrounded by countless myths and misunderstandings over the game in general, so it only further complicates the matter, especially to new people. Anytime someone questions the tournament rules of this game, it's almost always a blanket ban all bosses or allow all bosses, and a blunt, no-frills explanation. But I don't think it's that black and white of a discussion if I'm making this video talking about it. I've seen tournament rules of varying varieties passed around on Fightcade and in general discourse, between allow only Dan, ban only the Infinites, ban Geese and Zero and Red Reamer, or ban Shinakuma only, or even ban Shinakuma and Red Armor, but keep everyone else. With such divisive rule sets, what could possibly be the correct one to follow? Does such a rule set even exist? While not as important to the topic of the video itself, it also made me realize after helping to straighten out the details with Tampa Never Sleeps and their SVC Chaos bracket that well. How do I describe it? SVC Chaos has a competitive scene, it's always active on Fightcade, and people play it every day. It's a beloved game, and by no means is it niche or obscure. People obviously know the game exists, and is only niche in that it's not as widely regarded as CVS2 is. However, at least on the English-speaking side of the player base, there's also no one really pushing to run tournaments for the game that immediately comes to mind. But even outside of the English language, there really aren't that many tournaments online. It's an active game with a ton of great players in it that has also somehow managed to avoid having notable people running the event. Here's me, I guess. I stopped doing tournaments a while ago for my own sake, and I'm not good at commentary in my opinion either, but that's a separate topic. So where's the basis for the video then, if there's no overarching tournament history or consistent events for the game, despite always being on the front page of Fightcade and with several dozens of replays every day, if not hundreds, to come over? This video assumes you're familiar with SVC Chaos already, but super briefly, let's cover the important details. This is the roster, these are the normal characters, these are the bosses, these are the final bosses, and these are the busted bosses. Just because you're a boss character does not automatically mean you're good, and I don't only mean Dan. Athena sucks in this game, and serious Mr. Karate isn't that broken outside of max mode either. Even Gainitz has issues thanks to his own design, and also guard cancel front step, so let that sink in. Gainitz, who should be a legendarily broken boss in any other game, is at most a solid mid-tier here, but not an amazing character. Now then, let's start from the top with a simple hypothesis. Imagine a scenario of banning only the infinites. This is a frankly naive rule set I tried implementing myself when I first started running tournaments for SVC. Basically, only Geese and Zero infinites actually matter, as anyone else with an infinite is either very specific, requires tight execution, or both. And no, max mode loops are not infinites because they end. You don't need those other infinites to play a character. In fact, you don't need them for Geese and Zero either. They're so damn good that removing their infinites hardly hurts them at all. They're top 2 for so many other reasons beyond the infinite that at most, it's a slap on the wrist for them. If you know how to play these two characters, they crush the entire game, and at that point you realize that the infinite is only the cherry on top of what makes them insanely broken. Geese has the easier of the infinites, and it's quite literally just close C, forward D, and then cancel the dash up into another close C. Rinse, repeat, and again. This works both on hit and block, thanks to being able to cancel forward dashes, and forward D being a whopping plus 12 on hit, plus 10 on block, and it pushes Geese forward. Front step can barely save you, if at all. Zero, on the other hand, has to set it up and requires some finesse and consistent execution because pulling it off involves doing a tiger knee DP motion, easier said than done. If you can do it though, pat yourself on the back. It's not the main reason to play him though, since it's pretty specific. The other infinites, Kim's is too difficult to be practical with hotkey cancels, Chun-Li's only works on Dimitri, Shin Akuma requires really specific spacing and timing the fireballs just right, and it's frankly too much work to set up when you're playing Shin Akuma of all characters, and Orochi Iori's infinite does so little damage it's more annoying than it is threatening. So okay, banning the infinites doesn't work because it affects almost nothing. What then? These two characters are infamous even outside of the community that sometimes people even believe they're straight up flawless. It's only about half true, but it's fair to think so when they're two of the greatest characters in any fighting game. Basically, Geese has only one cancelable low outside of max mode, limiting his mix-ups and pressure, albeit it still lets him cancel into his juggable Reppuken, which is basically a when neutral button. Okay, he's flawless. The rest of these cons are just being nice. Zero, in short, has very low damage by himself and the steepest learning curve in the game, among other unique restrictions like only 3 Cyber Elf uses per match. Still, once you know how to use him, these flaws barely matter, and he remains perhaps the single strongest iteration of Zero in any fighting game. Okay, so this is an easy answer. Just ban Geese and Zero. They're clearly way too good to be allowed for tournaments, right? Well, that's where we already run into issues. Firstly, while Geese is easy, as I stated earlier, Zero is the hardest character to learn in the game. Why shouldn't you be rewarded for learning the hardest character? If you put in all that time, you deserve to play the most broken character you can. It's a demonstration of just how good you are, and people love Zero. And secondly, they're only mid-bosses. There's 8 mid-bosses and 4 final bosses, making a grand total of 12 boss characters, an entire third of the roster. And that third makes up a huge part of the game's identity too. Let's go over them. Shin Akuma is a giant middle finger, and one of the final bosses. He has pretty much all of what makes regular Akuma broken, both much higher health, the second highest health in the game actually, double air fireball that you can front step but is quite hard to deal with, infinite supers because they're converted to special moves, a loopable, unblockable raging demon on wake up and block strings, and is incredibly fast and easy to learn. He's not outright perfect like some people love to push him as, since he does have microscopic cracks in his gameplay, but he's busted as you would expect a final boss to be. He is the bane of many people's first experience with SVC Chaos, as one of the game's easiest characters to learn on a floor level, and really isn't that hard to pick up at top level either. Double air fireball alone does so much to completely shut down characters without front step that he should be banned on that alone. But he's only top 3 in my opinion, or top 5, but anyways. So he's worse than Geese and Zero, and again you can use front step to counter him at least somewhat. Well, watch SVC matches, and one thing you'll pick up on is that newer players or low level players almost never use front step if at all. It is the defining mechanic that makes the difference between a good or bad player. It is crucial to learn to play at a competitive level in SVC, as it changes every matchup in the game for every character. All of that, and often, Shinakuma is one of the first characters a new player picks, only for them to lose interest while also learning nothing about the game itself because they default to doing only air fireballs. While annoying, veterans can snuff out these lower level Shinakumas, and while I could go further to explain Shinakuma, the footage speaks for itself. It doesn't stop people from always picking him in a tournament setting, and even in casuals. And his X-Seed, you already know how disgusting it is. It's the best X-Seed in the game, and there's almost no avoiding it. Though I would be lying if I said Shinakuma mirrors aren't tight. You might say, then ban Shinakuma, we fix the problem. Ban top 3 and call it a day. If he makes life miserable for everyone and can force matches to go to the full 3 rounds because of Misogi, we shouldn't keep him. Unfortunately, that still doesn't resolve anything. If we ban one final boss, what about the other 3? One of them is Red Armor, who is also the bane of countless players. He does one thing, and one thing so disgustingly well, it's more foul-smelling than a local fighting game tournament. He floods the screen with projectiles and minions that are so overwhelming, it slows the Neo Geo down, and in mirror matches can potentially even crash the game. He is also a victim of new players, as they'll pick him up, spam minions, learn absolutely nothing about the game, and just assume this is the entire character without using all his other broken tools like his amazing fireball. Or if they're the ones fighting him, they assume he's literally impossible to kill and should by default be top 1, and then pick him themselves. His minions, however, have gaps to them you can exploit, and if you get up close to him, you realize his only good normal is his slide kick. Nearly everything else sucks and he can't fight, period. So he has counter picks, but only a few, and the rest have to play around him. A very unorthodox character to fight against, to say the least. So by this logic, we would need to ban Geese, Zero, Shinakuma, and Red Armor. Don't forget Athena, she's broken too. Well, let's further complicate the tournament rules. Athena is one of the final bosses, and at first glance she looks like a win button. Her attacks are massive and you can't avoid them. How in the world are you supposed to fight this character? New players absolutely cannot fight her, and she's so broken and easy to play that she's just a win button, right? Ban her. There is no way you can refute that. Right? Well, there is a way to refute that. Easy. Use front step and have patience. Now her one gimmick is deflated, and she is left with her normals at most to fight with, and extremely careful use of her specials. She's so easily punishable by this one simple trick that now every character can fight her, even the worst characters. So, she's low tier, thus she should be legal, right? And obviously, we don't dictate tournament rules by what a beginner player can and cannot handle fighting. The point of a tournament is to show who the good players are and come out on top. If we banned stuff based on what beginner players complained about, we would have to ban everyone. But she's also a boss, and we've established several times that we can't have bosses in the tournaments. But we have not yet established that Athena is also a big counter against Red Armor. She actually wins the matchup by considerable margin, and so do the other bosses. While Red Armor can still come out on top, he's fighting a really big uphill battle. So then, he is legal because Athena can just counter him, right? Well, if we get into the nuance of matchups, we'd be here all day. There's yet another dilemma between Athena and Red Armor. So maybe then the only logical answer is to ban all bosses, no matter who it is, but it still doesn't solve matters. Regardless of what your opinion on the bosses are, they also make up a huge part of the game's identity. Serious Mr. Karate is a contentious character. He is awful without max mode, albeit his zoning is still good on its own, but with max mode he is a force to be reckoned with, and pretty much forcibly changes how you fight him, as it's his match to control now. He even has an unblockable round boost setup with his XC to secure rounds with. Of the 4 final bosses, he's the most manageable and balanced out, albeit he is still a little ridiculous. Just a little. Some swear by him being awful, others praise how broken he is, but in short, consensus averages out to him being a good mid-tier character. If he's not even that threatening to fight, then why ban him? But the problem with that is he's a final boss, and again, he has an unblockable X-Seed. But Mars People also has an unblockable, and a Zero, and a few other characters. And Serious Mr. Karate is better than Athena, but Athena can be stuffed with basic patience despite Serious Mr. Karate being more manageable overall. So now, it's not only a conflict of interest between character strength, but also a conflict of interest between characters who aren't even fully agreed on by the player base who is and isn't good to begin with, or what's justifiable for tournament play. Still, we can't single out Serious Mr. Karate as being good enough of a boss character that for some reason he's allowed to exist in bracket, so yeah, let's ban all the bosses. Oh, ignoring the fact that Dan is a boss too. Dan sucks. I mean, come on, you already knew this. If you've played fighting games for any amount of time, he's the premier joke character. SVC Chaos is no different, and for several reasons, might be the worst iteration of Dan in a fighting game. I'm not a Street Fighter expert, so don't take my word for it, but he feels awful to play in this game and isn't even the worst character either. But like I just said, he's a boss. A mid-boss to be exact, and by far the worst of all the boss characters. If we ban all bosses, then Dan is banned too. And I already know that just by saying that, someone will yell out loud, allow Dan and ban everyone else. Then okay, if you let Dan, then let everyone else be tournament legal. Several other people would share that same sentiment because it goes right back to the black and white viewpoint of ban all bosses or allow all bosses. It goes nowhere. Who bans a bad character though? Same with Athena. And if you can do well with the character, then you should be allowed to showcase them in a competitive environment. But we can't do that because he's a boss character. He's not a final boss unlike Athena, but at what point do we stop? The line between having fair rules and basing them on someone's own biases towards the game is so blurry that the wall dividing the two might not even exist anymore. And we have to bring up the other bosses. Gainus is really good in this game, but despite being a boss character, he's at best high tier. You'd think for a character as infamous as he is, especially in KOF 96, that he'd be extremely broken in this game, but he really isn't. In fact, his tornadoes, his best feature, can in some ways actually backfire on him depending on the matchup, and with the way the game is designed, it's actually a lot harder for him to zone people out well, and more importantly, consistently. So don't ban him because he has weaknesses, but do ban him because he's a boss character and has unfair advantages that are enough to completely shut down some characters, but don't ban him because he requires execution and matchup knowledge. But do ban him because we banned him in games like KOF 96, 98 UMFE, and 02 UM. It's just a back and forth that's going nowhere. Again. Mars People has an unblockable super and an instant overhead exceed. Ban him. But he has blind spots and sucks at offense, so we can't. Dimitri, his hitboxes and general gameplay completely screw over some characters to the point of making the matchup its own game. Ban him. But he can't even reliably fight characters like Zero, so don't ban him. Violent Ken is... he's actually pretty normal. But despite that, he's a boss, so he's supposed to be banned, I guess. He has death combos with meter mid-screen and with Exceed, although he needs some execution in that his dash is nuts, and can sometimes mess up his own combos by crossing up the opponent if you aren't prepared for it. Sure, he replaces normal Ken as the much better character, however he's not even the best Shoto in the game though. Ryu is arguably better in some aspects even, despite Violent Ken being pretty good in my opinion, so hey, don't ban him. Seriously, this is his debut game, he's perfectly fine and you want to ban him from his own home? And who lets Orochi Iori in the game? He shuts nearly everyone down and replaces normal Iori, right? So ban him. But wait. He's a mid-boss, not a final boss, and he is tied for the lowest health in the game. Not to dwell on making comparisons to other games, but if we look at Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, by this logic, we should be banning Human Smoke because he does everything Scorpion does, but objectively better by having tools Scorpion does have. But he isn't banned, despite the fact Human Smoke replaces Scorpion, giving you no reason to ever pick Scorpion, he's still allowed. And Orochi Iori can't hop here, so that's a massive plus going for him in a KOF game down the drain. The difference between him and normal Iori is not as extreme. Iori has his own exclusive upsides, but still Orochi Iori is much better. It doesn't stop people from feeling like he's too fast though. Yet, there are characters better than him and people petition for him to be legal. Not to mention, fight a good Geese or Zero player, they still end up being a much bigger threat than Orochi Iori. But, he's a boss character, so sure, ban him. Now let's assume we did ban him. We have the regular characters, and Tessa completely shuts down regular characters too. Want Okizeme and knockdowns at nearly all available times? Play Tessa. She screws everyone over with insane mix-ups and unblockables. Ban her, I guess. Terry's way too busted in this game. He has almost zero recovery, and his rushdown is extremely good, and it's almost always his turn and he can punish almost everything. Ban him. Guile has 30 frame Sonic Booms because it's an SNK game. Ban him. Ignore the fact that he can't properly charge down back on the Neo Geo release due to an input bug. Akuma's Air Fireball also completely negates a lot of characters and your ability to move. That's way too strong to neutral, ban him. Now we're banning regular characters? Yeah, because even the regular roster is broken and has tech that would make old retro fighting games from the early 90s blush. But seriously, is anyone actually petitioning we ban regular characters like Tessa or Akuma? No. But if we go by the logic of character has broken things so we must ban, you also need to argue that nearly the entire roster needs to be banned too. But we can't do that even because the sub-bosses have been playable for years. Not to be confused with the final bosses, and they're not all even that good to begin with. Learn the matchup and learn front step. It changes everything. Front step is essential in SVC no matter who you play as. But then if we do that, Shinakuma and Red Armor are legal, and we already established they're extremely easy and tempting to pick for all the reward for no work. You know what? Let's just ban everyone. Discussing these rules is basically impossible. Screw fun, I want esports, and Genjiro personally hurt my feelings.
Gotta. So, let's get the most important rules out of the way. All characters are banned. No, not...
Alright, Lich, you made a beginner's guide video, you are cleaning up the wiki, you're very knowledgeable on the game and clearly love it, you've even ran a few tournaments before, surely you of all people have the answer to what the tournament rules should be, help us. And the simple answer is no. I don't have the perfect answer. No one does. This game really is ungovernable. It is truly that broken. So what now? Keep in mind that yes, I'm cleaning up the wiki, but it is not a one-man job, as I refer to others for input on the wiki and help on what I should add or change. A wiki would ideally be grounded in as much objectivity as possible, something only one person can't do alone. Making a beginner's guide video running tournaments also does not make me the sole authority of a video game or the community either. I do not speak on behalf of players like in Brazil, Mexico, Japan, China, or any other region that plays this game, like the Philippines, or even all of Fightcade. It does make my input more credible given my time invested to research the game, but I am one person, nothing more. And don't forget, I have my own biases just like everyone else would. However, that's also not the point of this video despite my already lengthy rant. I made this video not as a declaration of what the tournament rules should be, but to illustrate how impossible it actually is to create a unified rule set everyone can agree upon. You can even make the argument that if you feel the need to ban something in your game, then you shouldn't play it in the first place and just accept it as it is. And I do agree with that sentiment. I play so many broken fighting games that I'm desensitized to it all and just roll with the punches. Why does it matter if something breaks the game? It gives it identity. Money being involved does change the perspective a little, but you can't rebalance the game at the end of the day either. Even if nothing was banned, I'd still play SVC Chaos. There also comes a point where if you have to micromanage so much stuff in a game, then there's a chance you're actively making the health of the game worse for it. Fighting game balance is the exception, not the rule. People love countless fighting games like Super Turbo despite their problems, and instead we accept that. Why should SVC Chaos be treated any differently? Trying to ban anything in a fighting game, let alone top tiers, only ends up trying to quote-unquote fix something that doesn't need to be fixed. Fighting game bans almost never happen these days, because if you're banning something you need an iron-tight, valid reason to do so. Very rarely do we end up with a character like DBFZ Lab Coat Android 21, or a character like Ivan News in the Power Rangers SNES fighting game. Thus, a character like Geese being playable and a mid-boss, even though he's insanely broken, he's not a win button. You still have to put in the legwork and know how to play him well. SVC Chaos at high level demands you know the game inside out, and if you don't, well you don't. I will also say that it's fine to not like a game if you don't jive with its balance. Not every game is for everyone. After a certain point, the game will become so optimized that its problems will be made more abundantly clear, which at that point it's also too late to try and change what people have grown used to. Whatever the case though, you can't ban stuff willy-nilly. If people are playing the game on a competitive level, they probably accept it as is. You don't need to like it, but that's your own perspective too. Now to break the pacing a little bit, near the end of May I traveled to Chicago for the weekend for Combo Breaker, and I had a blast. Before going there, however, I took a visit to the Galloping Ghost arcade and had a ton of fun. Setting aside some woes and the SVC Chaos cab, funnily enough, having a blood red screen, I'd recommend the place. It was there I met and chatted with Legendary Blue Shirt, and as I told him about this video, he offered some really good points. The biggest 2 points is 1, a simpler rule set for any game is the better approach, something I imagine most people can agree with. And 2, you need to establish which version of the game is being played, something I never considered before. So then, what version do we play? If we were still on Fightcade 1 with Final Burn Alpha, all we had was SVC Plus, meaning the final 4 bosses weren't accessible, but functionally it's still the same as vanilla. But we have Fightcade 2 now as of summer of 2020, and with that, we got SVC Super Plus on Final Burn Neo, meaning everyone is available now. That also means the final 4 bosses haven't been more widespread than now, but are also only about 4 years old in modern online play too. But the problem with that logic is that PS2 and Xbox ports existed as well, where they were available, albeit you had to unlock Athena and Red Armor. In the US, we only had Xbox, but Europe and Japan also got PS2 SVC. Were people running Xbox tournaments of this game back then? Maybe. I honestly don't know. But Japan wouldn't need to run the console version, they still had arcades. And in Europe, well, I still don't know, but they'd have both ports to work with. Logistically speaking, they had always been available, but only offline, and it wasn't until Fightcade 2 that everyone had easy access to them because of a bootleg ROM. Not an official release, yet everyone plays on it these days, especially when no one wants to memorize the boss codes. I mean, can you blame them? Picking between Neo Geo and console is also a matter of how the game handles charge inputs, because on Neo Geo, charging is scuffed. It can only charge one set of special moves, but not the other, and holding down back doesn't work as it should. This is, however, fixed on console, where charging down back does work for both sets of special moves, and while Guile is the only good charge motion character to begin with, it is still a very slight balance change between the two versions. Enough that I'd argue it makes Guile just a tiny bit better. For the sake of moving on, I'm just going to assume hypothetically people agree to play Super Plus. However, please also keep in mind Fightcade 2 doesn't have the SVC Plus lobby, only Super Plus, so we don't know if people would have stayed in the Plus lobby, and we have no clear way of establishing what version is being played beyond Fightcade, which isn't the only way to play the game either. The Code Mystics re-release on modern platforms is certainly a big boon too. It's based on the AES ROM of the game, but with Athena and Red Armor, selectable by default and no codes, and it even features lobbies with custom ban lists too. Almost nothing's changed, even if now, on a technicality, everyone is accessible for all players on almost all platforms. And just to quickly answer, yes, it's a solid port of the game. It has some input lag, but it's not nearly as bad as people are making it out to be, and even I've gotten used to it a little. Let's assume then that I'm being held at gunpoint and I have to come up with tournament rules now. In that case, if I genuinely had to come up with something, it would be to only ban the final bosses, but keep everyone and everything else as long as it doesn't crash the game. Playing SVC casual matches, you can still have fun playing the boss characters, but competitively, I don't think anyone is going to lose sleep if you couldn't play these 4 characters. For a while, SVC Plus was the only way to play the game online with rollback. This was the standard for a long while thanks to GGPO and Fightcade 1. The final 4 bosses weren't unlocked, so you couldn't pick them. The mid-bosses though, bootleg ROM or not, you can always pick. You just need to memorize codes if it's the vanilla game. That would suggest then that they were always intended to be playable by the devs. If you look at the defense modifiers of the boss characters, you can see that their health is actually reduced in their playable counterparts compared to the CPU counterparts. That is, except for the final 4 bosses, but you get the point. You can then keep everything else and just remove the last 4 bosses, as this was the intended arcade experience and what every version of the game has access to at all times. It was only until Fightcade 2 that the final 4 bosses were more readily available for online play. The big difference too is that no matter how broken Geese, Zero, Tessa, Dimitri, or what have you are, they're manageable. Extremely broken and gatekeeping characters, but manageable. You don't have to fundamentally change how you play the game or think about your own character just to survive in the first place. The final 4 bosses fundamentally change the game on a competitive level and make it extremely tempting to just pick them instead. In turn, it just becomes counterpick the fighting game. It doesn't matter they're not the best when they aren't selectable in all versions of the game, and also play an entirely separate experience from the rest of the cast. And this probably goes without saying, but I don't want to imagine the number of Red Armor mirror matches in a tournament that grind the game to a screeching halt as a result, and in turn, longer tournaments. On another long point with regards to this rule set, and to make the record explicitly straight and clear, this has nothing to do with the SVC Chaos Discord server either. Since I joined it, anytime I ran tournaments for it in the past, it was either allow everyone but ban infinites, or ban all bosses altogether. The server as a collective has never actually ran this rule set before for brackets we ourselves ran prior. The SVC bracket for Tampa Never Sleeps was merely input from a few players, as well as me, on what a suggested rule set would be, but it was never explicitly agreed upon by the wider community or server yet. To ban the final 4 bosses was only recently discussed and decided upon, and prior to around a few months before the re-release was never brought up. So ultimately, this rule set is still only a suggestion as of making this video, not a definitive, declarative, do this for the game. TNS is a convincingly good example of the rule set, at least in my opinion. Despite almost all of the bosses being legal as long as they could be selected in arcades, the character variety was huge even from the top players like El Karate. Vega of all characters made it into grand finals, and do you want to know how terrible Vega is in this game? Very bad, to say the least, and I play him as one of my favorite characters, so I can verify that. The whole bracket was a big success, staff involved did great, no complaints from me. So how did the chat react to the rule set? They lost their shit over it, just to illustrate how divisive the rules are. And yes, I realize that you also do not dictate tournament rules based solely on what retains viewership. It's way too subjective to come up with, and not to mention if you're in the tournament, who the hell cares what the viewer likes? You're there to win. Do anything you can to win that's within tournament legality to do so. In essence though, I think it's at least valid that we'd all agree a game of only Shinakuma and Red Armor would get old and fast and make beginner level tournaments borderline unfunctional. But anyways, this kind of rule set frames the game not from a subjective viewpoint of character strength and what deems something too broken, but rather it frames the game from an objective viewpoint of character availability and intended game design based on what was initially available, the arcades or Neo Geo MVS. We can then act like the final 4 bosses are console-only characters, something that all other Neo Geo games do not allow in tournaments due to availability if they're not explicitly selectable in the arcade release. Sure, Serious Mr. Karate and Shinakuma are selectable on AES, but the point stands. And the official SVC Chaos MOOC doesn't even detail the final 4 bosses either. Plus, places like the Japanese arcade game center Mikado play the unmodified vanilla game cards where you cannot select the final 4 bosses. So imagine, if you will, they are used to never having to practice against these characters, they hop onto Fightcade, and all of a sudden, they're forced to contend with these 4 characters that they never had to think about all these years in a tournament setting. I imagine they wouldn't be happy. I hope that by watching this video you understand my point with why banning the final 4 is maybe the best compromise. Whether you also ban infinites is not for me to decide, but there are more important things to worry about than 2 infinites in the game that, frankly, if you get hit by them, that's on you. The player base is by no means tiny since it's pretty active on Fightcade and tech for the game, and its meta is pretty well defined by this point. But it also isn't big enough to support more than 1 tournament rule set. I guess once in a blue moon you could try to run a no bans tournament. Bare minimum, if money is involved, I think maybe don't allow the final 4 to be there. Still only a suggestion. This video has gone on long enough by now. What I just described is ultimately only 1 tournament rule set of countless rule sets. Your takeaway from this video ultimately should be that SVC Chaos tournament rules are an enigma. An enigma no one can truly solve, but also an enigma that, like many things in the world, is dictated by people's biases and misconceptions of the game, muddying the discussion. Hell, you might just interpret it as me rambling about nothing, and I ended it on a cop-out answer. That's perfectly valid, and in some sense I am. Maybe I wanted an excuse to just make another video about SVC Chaos. Maybe I just wanted to vent to myself. Whatever the case, thank you for watching my video. I still love SVC Chaos myself and will always play it. By watching my video, please walk away understanding that boiling the conversation down to ban all bosses or allow all bosses doesn't actually address this dilemma of tournament rules and consider the nuance of it. No matter what, if you like SVC Chaos, go play SVC Chaos. What you like in a video game can only be defined by you and your opinion, and more importantly, tournaments are not the only way to play fighting games, nor should that be the entire discussion of it either. SVC Chaos Tournament Rules is a discussion worth having, if nothing else, for the sake of understanding the game on a deeper level and diving into the theory of a fighting game's competitive depth. Not a blanket ban X thing, or if you do ban something, base it on something more impactful like the character availability, because the final 4 bosses not being available to every person in the world in every release or version of the game isn't what I'd consider fair, no matter how good or bad they are. It's a technicality, not an opinion at that point. Well, also the fact that rerelease slows the game down massively, but anyways. The SVC player base ultimately has to live with the fact that you need to ban something if you want a quote-unquote fair competitive experience, yet at the same time, bosses make up a massive part of the game's identity, both casually and competitively. They're fun bosses, and I'm not saying none of them are fun to play as, but finding where the line is frankly too complicated of a subject. SVC Chaos is, like most fighting games, broken, and that's okay. But I need to lay this entire discussion to rest permanently, and I need to stop writing this script at some point or else we'd be here all day. Shinakuma existing is not going to always hurt you. Being broken is its own art form. SVC Chaos is an art house film, and I love it. Please play SVC Chaos.